Good evening, welcome everybody to our full council, Monday 24th September. Before I start, can I please inform everybody that this meeting is recorded. As long as everybody is happy to be filmed, welcome to stay for the duration of the meeting until we have any part two. Onto our agenda. First of all, apologies.
Yes, Mr Mayor, had two apologies for Council to accept. Councillor Maynard, who is on holiday, and Councillor Talley, who has work commitment.
Thank you very much. I can't see Councillor Weaver here. I know he's there. I see a gap down there. Welcome, Michael. Sorry. Right, on to number two. Declarations of interest.
Yes.
Councillor Farmer.
Thank you. Yes, I declare a personal pecuniary interest in item 8.5, which is the Harpenham Hopper. The Director, I will be leaving the room for that item.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Chairman, I want to declare a personal non-pecuniary interest in item 8.3 relating to the Section 106 agreements. As this involves an agreement with Hertfordshire County Council, I consider it inappropriate to participate in that discussion, in the vote, but I do intend just to remain in the room whilst the discussion is happening.
Thank you very much. Right.
Yep.
Yes.
Right, it's item 8.4, which is the Affordable Housing Project Tender Document. As a dual-headed district and town councillor, I declare personal non-pecuniary interest and shall still stay and vote.
So does this seem to affect all the district councillors?
Yes.
So, Councillor Ellis.
Make that on behalf of all.
So, if we include all the district councillors in that, I was going to declare a non-pecuniary interest in the Hopper investment. I will continue to chair the meeting. I won't get involved in the discussion. I won't get involved in the vote because obviously my wife is part of the committee for this project. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I've got an interest in agenda item 8.4. Our personal non-pecuniary interest is trustee of East Harpenham Garden Club.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Chair, can I just confirm, in terms of the district councillor interest, is that all non-pecuniary interest, and is that for both of the affordable housing items?
Is that the advice that that's got?
Well, I did take advice from the learned town clerk and suggested what I just said was the correct thing to do.
Fine.
Because nomination rights are going to district council.
So, Chair, that would be my advice. If you're a district councillor, I would declare non-pecuniary personal interest for both of the affordable housing items.
Right. So, are the district councillors who are here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, are we happy to all be included with that? Okay. That will be all right. 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 We move on to item 3, which is the mayor's report of urgent items. I only really wanted to bring one thing to those members of the council who didn't know. I was indirectly involved with the South Down Festival the weekend before last, which was a very successful event put on by local people, and I'm pleased to say they managed to raise just under £2,300, of which they gave £1,480 to my charities. So it was a very successful evening, well, the whole weekend actually, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and it was nice to be involved in it. Right. we'll move on. Item 4, public questions in accordance with standing order. Have we got any?
None received, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 5, any questions previously submitted by members of the council?
Again, none received.
Okay, good. Right, on to the minutes of those of you who were here on the 25th of June. Are you happy to sign the minutes? There's been a report on our doings that night.
Agreed.
Can I see a show of hands? Okay, anybody again? No. Good. Sign me. You sign it. I'll just sign it back. Thank you very much. Yes, yes, please. So we've got number 7, minutes of committees and working parties reporting to the council.
And if I can just, Chair, just to flag, councillors, you have in front of you an additional information sheet relating to this agenda item. So this sheet just provides some clarity on the amended paragraphs that you're asked to approve within the financial regulations and the capital reserve policy. It also includes reference to the planning committees that have met since the last meeting, which need to be received under 7.3.
Okay. So 7.1, Community Services Committee. I can't remember who. Oh, right, of course, yes, sorry. You move forward.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to present to Council the minutes of the Community Services Committee held on the 18th of July 2018. There are no recommendations.
Thank you very much. 7.2, Corporate Policy and Finance.
Call me Mary, so that's the right I was in for this. Right, 7.2 is just receiving the minutes of the 13th of June. That's the first aspect. And the second one is 7.4 Capital Reserve Policy, which is on the spreadsheet, which in fact is recommend to Council that paragraphs 4.3 to 4.5 of financial regulations be amended, and that's the explanation sheet from our part. So we have a vote on this, I'm guessing.
Thank you very much. Oh, right, my apologies. So we need to have a vote on if everybody's happy with this new policy on the capital reserve. So can I have a show of hands if everybody's happy with this new proposal? All good, thanks very much, unanimous. Okay. Right, so on the extra additional information sheet, we've got item 7.3 now, which is the Planning Advisory Committee A. Can I ask Councillor Canfield to...
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I thought I got out of it tonight, but there we are. Not at the end of it, thank you. Right, formally present the minutes of the 17th of July 2018 and 28th of August 2018 for both of the Plans A committees, and there are no recommendations to Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Planning Advisory Committee B. I have to be the chairman. I'd like to present to Council the minutes of the meeting that held on the 26th of June and the 7th of August 2018. There are no recommendations. Right. going on to, we're jumping officers reports, which is, the first one is the forward planner, which has got pages 13 to 16 on the first agenda.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. This just sets out the future agenda items that are due to come to Council over the next 4 meetings. Council are asked to note and approve the forward plan and add any comments or amendments that they see fit.
Councillor James?
Yeah, I understand the Strategic Local Plan Working Party was cancelled in September, that meeting. Are we going to respond to the consultation on the new local plan? I think that the deadline is October, isn't it?
Yes, so the plan will be for the Town Council to pull together a response.
But without approved by though?
So that will either be through one of two routes, either through the Strategic Planning Committee.
So we will be having a meeting then?
That will either be through the Strategic Planning Committee convening that, or through Corporate Policy and Finance at its next meeting, which has a responsibility for considering consultation responses. So we can go down whichever route the Council deems most appropriate for that.
Okay, so no, either one or the other. Okay.
I mean, has anybody happy for us to make a decision and go down one of those routes?
Well,
Sorry, Councillor James?
as we have a bona fide working party set up to discuss a planning issue, the local plan, I think that would probably be the best route, and I would recommend that.
So is the rest of the Council happy with those thoughts? To go down the Councillor Canfield, are you just voting?
Sorry, on a point of information, will that then go to the Community Services, or will that go direct?
So Strategic Planning Committee has the ability to directly feed in that consultation response.
Okay, so what we'll try and
Fine,
do
thank you.
is convene that meeting before the Policy and Finance meeting, and then have that response at that meeting. Is that okay, Councillor James?
Yes. When is when is the Policy and Finance next meeting? Is that's due? The 17th is the cut-off, isn't it?
So for it to go through the Strategic Planning Committee, that would have to be considered at that committee ahead of that deadline and go straight into the response. There wouldn't be a Corporate Policy and Finance Committee that would meet after the Strategic Planning Committee in order to approve that. So we can convene the Strategic Planning Committee and have that response through, which is the way in which we did the last time with the last response to the local plan.
Okay, thank you.
Are you happy with that?
Yep.
Councillor Martin?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, do you mean it will be fed through to full council for agreement after that meeting?
No, we haven't got a full Council meeting before it's
I know.
submitted.
So we're just going to call,
So we've just done
convene
strategic
an
planning.
emergency meeting of the committee. Sorry, I'm not sure how we're going to manage this before the cut-off.
So the normal approach for the Strategic Planning Committee is it doesn't have set meetings throughout the year, it meets in response to certain items. And so in the same way in which we did last time for the local plan, and indeed another consultation which I think was actually the Central Base Local Plan Committee was called, and the response was put together by the councillors on that committee, and that was submitted. So that would be the way in which we would do it this time under our standing orders.
Okay,
You happy with that?
I've got any choice.
It's a bit difficult to convene a full council between sort of then, when we can do a planning committee, and then try and get a full council together. I mean, really, we need to vote. If the councillors are happy here tonight for us to take that strategy forward at the moment, are you happy for us to do that? Sorry, Councillor Palmer.
Sorry, I didn't want to obstruct your flow.
No.
I was going to say, presumably, though, that obviously, since it's a council committee, members, any member who wishes may submit comments upon it to that committee.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
We'll convene a date.
Yeah, in fact, Mr. Mayor, I think it's a useful suggestion. We can put out, and then any comments in advance, that would be really useful. Just to clarify matters of procedure, there's nothing for this council to vote on tonight in order to make that happen. It's not something on the agenda, therefore there's no matters that we can vote on, but certainly noted that that's the preferred option. We can convene that meeting to get the response together.
So you have that, Councillor Martin, that you can submit any comments you want, or indeed, becomes an interesting party. Okay, so, lost what it was now. So we're on to... Right, so the forward plan that we've got on page 13 to 16, recommendations were to note and approve, subject to any comments. Is everybody happy? The forward plan I laid out before you. Can you please show hands that you're all happy with that? Good. Yeah, thank you very much. So we move forward to key projects update. So it's the observer update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there are 3 items I'd just like to update Council on relating to some of our key projects. The first is the neighbourhood plan, and I'm really pleased to report that it's passed its independent examination very recently, and it now moves through to hopefully the final stage, which is the community referendum. The community referendum is expected to take place on either the 24th, 31st of January or the first week in February. The next stage to formally set that date is a report that goes through to the District Council Cabinet in the middle of October for approval of that date. So yeah, we've passed the examination and now on to the referendum stage. In terms of the new storage depot, you'll be familiar, this is a very big project for us and operationally will be fantastic once we get it in place. Update that the District Council, through the planning referrals, approved the planning application for the leisure development, of which our storage depot is part. So this now goes through to Secretary of State for approval. I understand expecting this to be between 4 to 6 weeks. The important thing for us is work is due to start on site in January, with the storage depot being the first part. It's almost an enabling part of the development. So we're waiting on final timings as to when we expect the storage depot complete, but we are hopefully to see something around March, April time. But I will circulate confirmation of dates once I have them. And the final thing is just to update you on a very current project that you may have seen out and around, and we've communicated a lot on, and that's the air raid shelters. So we're now in the second of a 4-week project of infilling the air raid shelters, and so far that operation has gone very well. We have carried out some scans, digital scans of all the air raid shelters prior to them being infilled, and the links have been circulated previously, and I think they're a really good resource to showcase where they once were. And we also have 2 interpretation boards that will be installed in the next sort of 2 to 4 weeks. Again, that will help us to celebrate the kind of the history of them. So I just wanted to give you a brief update on those 3 key projects.
Good. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Canfield.
Well, rather than a question, just a comment, Mr. Mayor. So I'd like to congratulate all those involved as to how well the project has been managed. I actually witnessed them pumping the required concrete into the one on Leighton Green today, and I was impressed by the way the operation was run. It was very slick. The lorries were coming and going fairly quickly, and very little disruption to the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As I heard Councillor Canfield sort of searching for the right word for after she's a pumping, I could just picture one of my earlier meetings as a town councillor and Councillor Wakely reminding us he was a civil engineer and telling us precisely what concrete it was. I'm afraid I can't remember exactly what concrete, but I involved, yes, aerated and foamy in some way, and very dangerous apparently. But anyway, I'd like to join Councillor Canfield with congratulations to Town Clerk and his officers on the first class work they've done with this. I think it's really great that we've come to a resolution of this. It's a shame in many ways we weren't able to preserve one, but it's absolutely fantastic that we've got that digital resource and the hard copy resource there in the town. But it reminds me of something that has been brought up in committee before, which is something that I know the Hartland Historical Society are interested in, and that's that there are quite a lot of photos from that era of civil defence exercises and things like that, and some time ago I know that a lot of those photos which were framed on the wall in the Cross Keys Public House were removed. This was something like 2 years ago, and I remember the town clerk indicated that he would be happy to direct an officer to try and find out what had become of those. It would be very good to try and locate them, because if the public house don't want to keep them anymore, it would be quite good to invite them to perhaps make that donation to the Hartland Historical Society, because I think that's another first-hand primary source for historians, particularly for younger children and students in the town, for whom the Second World War is rapidly turning into a distant memory. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tisdale. Any other comments that people would like to raise, or anybody knows any more about the bunker? I know Councillor Tisdale has actually been down, haven't you? Years ago.
I think yes,
Councillor Williams has as well.
I was just looking for the picture. If a picture needs to go on the boards, then we do have an excellent picture of Councillor Chichester Miles that I can share with you.
Several pictures of Councillor Williams as well.
So, anybody else going to make comments on it? No? So, if you're all happy with that, right, we move on to 8.3. The biggest project that the council has ever undertaken, the Westfield project. You've all got the extra paperwork that arrived over the weekend. There's some additional notes coming around the end.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've just passed around an additional sheet there. This forms part of my update and introduction to this item this evening, and I thought rather than me just giving you a verbal update, and that's something in front of you, because it does link to certain parts of the report that you've had already. So you will remember, Mr. Mayor, that we, in order to secure outline planning permission for the development, are required to secure a Section 106 agreement, and we need to do so by mid-October. The version that you had sent around to you is a result of negotiations between legal representatives of the Town Council, District Council and the County Council. And this evening the Council is asked to consider and approve the draft 106 agreement, which was set out in Appendix A, titled "The Deed is Dated." That was the headline of that, and which was circulated on Friday. I must say apologies for the fact that it wasn't circulated any sooner than that. That was as soon as I got it, unfortunately, and given the fact that we've got quite a number of different legal teams that have been looking at it, it's been quite tricky in putting something together in relatively speedy deadlines of 3 months. The discussions on this particular paper are ongoing, and I have actually received further updates since the version released to you on Friday, which is what the single paper here in front of you, and I would like just to run through those if that's okay. So this is the paper that's titled Update to Appendix A of the report titled Affordable Housing. And just also to say, I am also aware that in the version that's sent around there are some minor grammatical errors and formatting issues within there that will get picked up. So if I can, Mr. Mayor, can I just talk through the updates that are set out in here? I've tried to link them directly into the actual paper that was sent round. So update 1 is quite a simple one, so it's on page 1 of the appendix that was sent round to you. So paragraph F, so it's just to add in the date on that 16th of July was the date on which the District Council resolved the grant planning permission. Update 2 was on page 2 under the definitions, under 1.1. So you're on the appendix that was sent round.
Sorry, Carl.
That's all right. So it's this report here, the one that's titled Affordable Housing Project Section 106 Agreement. So if you go to the appendix there, which is marked as page 1, so it's the third page in. So page 1 is the front page of the Section 106 Agreement.
Were these sent electronically or?
They were sent electronically.
Oh right, I didn't them off. Okay.
No, they won't be. So these are ones that came out on Friday. Has anybody not got a copy of them?
No, I haven't.
I printed it out. I've got it on my phone. So.
You can keep it, okay.
Thank you.
So my starting point for my updates is the page that starts here. This deed is dated at the top here. So using the supplementary page that you've got on there. So the updates as mentioned. So page 1, paragraph F. Where there's a date missing, that is the 16th of July 2018, which was the date at which District Council resolved the Grant Planning Commission, subject to the Section 106. On page 2, under definitions 1.1, there are 2 changes here. So affordable housing, the wording now reads, affordable housing means 24 housing units to be managed or owned by an affordable housing provider. So that's the additional part in there. So managed and owned by an AHP. The affordable housing units now reads means 24 housing units which are to be provided as affordable housing for qualifying persons. And the qualifying persons are linked to the allocations policy of the District Council. Update 3 on page 3 under ecology. The hedge that is referred to in this is down the far end of Marquis Meadow in Batford Springs. The only area down towards Biggets Hill Lane which doesn't have a hedge along it. Update 4 is under the definitions on page 4. So the definition for shared ownership units. So the wording on this now is means a unit of affordable housing to be made available by an AHP under a shared ownership lease. Update 5 is on page 9, 8.2. So there's a sentence error on this one, so this should read, is the figure specified in clause 8.1, so i.e. 175. Update 6 is on page 15, paragraph 3. So there is now an additional paragraph 3.1, which reads, not to occupy the affordable housing units until the management or ownership of them has been transferred to an affordable housing provider. And the final update 7, also on that, the paragraph that was previously 3.1 now reads as the words that you set out on the subject there. So those are the updates to the document that you have in front of you. Council's request, the request of Council tonight is to consider and approve the Section 106 agreement so that we can finalise discussions and negotiations with District and Council.
So those of us who can vote, everybody except Councillor Williams, isn't it? I think. Sorry, Councillor Williams?
Everybody can vote.
Everybody can vote. My apologies, sorry.
Councillor Williams is not choosing.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right, so my apologies.
So, Mr Mayor, if I may, I'm not intending to vote. I don't want to take part in any of the discussion, but I just wonder if the town clerk can just clarify why there are no obligations in respect of education. I would have expected a development like this to have included some requirement for education, primary and secondary.
So, Mr Mayor, I don't know the details as to why that isn't included in there. All we have taken, the negotiations are taken and led by the district through the original outline planning application and the conditions that are set out in there. And so the agreement you have in front of you is a result of that, and that's the starting point, is what we get from the planners.
Councillor James?
Yeah, it wasn't actually in the committee report either. I noticed that. So maybe it's because the benefits of having 100% affordable housing outweigh the, the burden, because it would be quite a substantial burden for education.
Councillor Gill?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is on the section 106 and the other is on the tenure mix, so maybe we might come back to that one. The first question was on the sustainable transport, just like a bit of clarity as to what that includes. I mean, I can imagine what it might include, buses and maybe cycle racks or something, but if we could just clarify that. My second question was on the tenure mix. I don't know if you want to take that now or because we talked about the section 106. So just asking what was the tenure mix, because I couldn't quite, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming it was 30% social rent and the rest shared ownership, or because I was trying to decipher that from the report and couldn't find it anywhere, so just wondering.
Yeah, so Mr Mayor, all we've committed to in the tenure mix at the moment is 100% affordable housing scheme, of which at least 30% or 8 units will be for socially rented. Set out in the tender document in the next item. We'll talk about them, but we talk in more detail about how we are asking registered providers to respond to that tender mix within their tenders.
I'm going on to the...
David.
Sorry.
Chair, if I may, just in relation to Councillor's questions around education, if I may offer a consideration. I understand, and it's similarly for developments in Grove Road, where there's about 34 units. The County Council hasn't been able to take any 106 in relation to education under the civil regulations about bulking it all together. So they don't take small pockets now. We're controlled by the civil regulations, 106 regulations. That's one of the reasons behind it, I understand. Any help?
Just, Mr Mayor, to answer Councillor Gillen's other point about sustainable transport. So the sustainable transport contribution is to go towards improvements to access on the Nicky line.
Oh, okay, yes. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Yeah.
Any other questions that anybody sees? Points they'd like to pass on to us? Points of information? Councillor Paul.
Obviously, nomination rights go to districts, don't they? Is that limited to Hartlepool residents or the whole district as a whole? Do we know?
You know more than I do.
The plan at the moment is to enter into something called a local lettings arrangement, which means that priority will be given to Hartlepool residents for the new housing. You can't make it an absolute commitment, because if there aren't sufficient, obviously a housing association can't afford to have empty properties. So people are given priority who have a Hartlepool waiting list, and then you sort of work your way down, and then if there's any left, it will be allocated generally.
Councillor Gillen?
Yeah, just to come back on Brian's point, that is, yeah, I've heard of that in other councils across the country. They shared ownership schemes, other affordable housing is sometimes allocated for local people, so it is common, and I think it's a good thing to do.
Thank you very much. Any other points that people would like to raise?
What, just generally, or specifically about...
Well, about the 106.
Sorry?
About the 106.
106.
Yeah.
I've got lots of points actually, but
Anything particularly you can answer tonight?
Okay, all right. I will leave them until a point where I can.
If it's something you can raise with the town clerk at a later date, phone up with something you'd like for the public domain for all of us to hear. I'm happy for to raise a question now.
I suppose I'm a little bit disappointed that we're discussing such an important issue right now, and we're up against making a decision The application got approved in July, now we're in the end of September. I suppose I would have liked a little bit more time to actually get the best deal for Harpenden, and I support 100% having affordable housing on that site, don't get me wrong, I think, but I really do resent the fact that we're actually selling it off to the highest bidder, and I would prefer the Town Council to have ownership and stewardship of a valuable community asset for the future, so that we actually had control of that, the development on that site, either through a community land trust or you know, actually seeing the application through ourselves. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, all I would say is under the next item on the tender, I don't think it's accurate to say that we were selling off to the highest bidder. I think the options set out within the tender we'll consider it's not necessarily just about the highest bidder, and I think that will be a key consideration of the assessment panel that will need to be set up to report back to council, and that will be a council decision to look at that. I think in terms of us running and managing things ourselves, it's not impossible. However, it's very difficult because we're not an affordable housing provider, and we're not a registered provider in that sense.
But there is the mechanism there that we can set up a community land trust. You know, the legislation has been, funnily enough, by the Conservative government. It's all there for communities to take ownership of areas and make sure that it is provided for Harpenden people. You know, anyway, but I think we're too far. I just wanted to put my point across right now before it's too late anyway.
Right, so we need to take a vote on the proposal before us regarding the 106 agreement. The recommendation is to approve the draft 106 agreement set out in Appendix A, which we've got in front of us tonight, with the amendments that Carl's explained to us this evening. So those in favour of us approving this, can you please shout? So, and those against? Abstention, yes. Abstention, yes. So we move forward now to the second part of this, which is 8.4 on our agenda, for the same project, which is the tender document. I'll pass on to the town clerk to give his report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the report is largely as set out. There are a small number of updates I just want to give to you. One is substantial in terms of wording, the rest are kind of more formatting type things that I wanted just to flag with you just for clarity. So starting on page 21 of your agenda pack, so just a small point to add on here. So under Appendix 2, the Appendix 2 now has a 2A and a 2B. With the 2B being the proposed site plan, the 2A is the outline planning permission, which we don't formally have as yet because we haven't formally agreed to Section 106 agreement, which you've just considered. Also on page 21, under 4B, there is an additional allotment consent that we have from May 2003, just to be clear, that wasn't circulated to you on Friday in error, which relates to the current access land onto the allotments. So this was consent that we had in 2003 to take this out of allotments as well. I have a copy of the letter here should you wish to take that away for your reference as well, but that completes the 3 bits of the jigsaw on the allotments consent that date back to the early 2000s. on page 22,
Sorry, can I ask a question on that?
Oh, sorry, Councillor.
That clarifies the point I raised earlier, then.
on page 22 of your pack, under...
Sorry,
Sorry.
Councillor.
I'm not sure I'm entirely in the right spot at the minute, but looking at the letter from Go East, dated the 8th of October 2002, it refers to the plan on the other side of it. There's the 3.65 metres thin strip. So is that relevant to the entire one that we've seen in the other outline map? Is the 3.65 retained, and if so, who by, or has it been subsumed into the whole thing?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry if I wasn't clear on that. So there is a third letter, which wasn't in your pack sent out, which is here, which is from May 2003. I've got a copy here, if you would like a copy. And what that does, that sets out on that additional strip of land, which is down here,
Yeah.
to take that out of allotment use as well. So the permission received from that was in May 2003 from then Government Office for the East of England. So that completes the jigsaw. It's none of it is retained. The only retained bit is the current allotments.
Thank you.
Thank you for that one. If I may, Mr. That clarifies. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Canfield raised it earlier, but you're all happy now.
So on page 22 under 1.3, the end of the words open countryside, there's an additional sentence been put in there, which says, note that whilst the plan for planning permission indicates a pedestrian and cycle link from the site to the Lee Valley Walk, this is subject to the buyer obtaining the necessary consent from St Albans District Council. So that just recognises the fact that the District Council will need to be an easement that's entered into the District Council to allow access onto the Lee Valley Walk from that part of the site. On page 22, a small addition on paragraph 2.3. After nomination rights, the words for the rented units are set out. Just to clarify, the nomination rights are for the socially rented units. And on page 23, small change in terms of the legal appendices. They should read 4A to D rather than 5A to D. And the final change is on page 25 and onwards, and that's to say that all references to registered social landlord has been changed to registered provider. It's just worth just saying that those updates are as a result of some last minute suggestions from our legal team, but also having shown this to housing officers at District Council to get their advice on these sorts of matters. So those are some of the late additional changes to the version that you had circulated with the agenda.
Anybody got any questions they'd like to raise on this matter before you? I know it's quite detailed and quite involved. I realise that Councillor James.
Yeah, what about the right to buy? Will these properties be sold in the end? Is there any covenant on that? Shared ownership in, once they've got 80%, they own the
Councillor Ellis, who does this all full time.
Just
Yeah,
reply to
will
this.
explain.
Yeah. Well, of course, the right to buy applies to everything. Right, so you can't get away from that even if you're... But the thing is, because if we held them, if we as a council or the district council held these, they'd be subject to right to buy. Okay? Yeah. However, right to buy at the moment does not apply to housing associations.
That's just 30% though, isn't it? The shared ownership, as soon as you've got a majority stakeholder in that house, it's yours. It no longer becomes affordable, does it?
If it's subject to if it's a shared ownership property, yes, you can of course ultimately buy it. But at the moment we don't know whether there's going to be any shared ownership. It depends on the quotations you get from housing
So
associations.
is it pertinent to have something in the section 106 that they have to be affordable in perpetuity rather than...
I don't think we can impose that.
So really and truly, in a few years' time, it won't be an affordable housing site.
Councillor Hawking?
Thank you. Isn't the government trialling the right to acquire?
Sorry?
Isn't the government trialling right to acquire for housing associations soon?
Yes, and some time ago, when it was originally mooted, the idea was that right to buy would be extended to housing associations. But I think there's been such a reaction to that because if you bought the house, let's say it was one of these houses, okay, you would be able to buy it and you occupied it. You'd be able to buy it at a significant discount. Typically for this area, that discount would be about £70,000. Okay, so the idea was that, but you can't impose that on housing associations because they're charities. You can't force them to sell properties at undervalue. You see what I mean? So that's where, when this was first introduced, I don't know, a couple of decades ago, that's when it fell down at the House of Lords on that ground. So the next step was the government said, okay, how are we going to find that 70,000 discount? And the plan was to force local authorities, like the district council, to sell some of their housing, okay, and the profit on that would, it sounds a bit complicated, and it is, but the scheme fell apart. It didn't work. There was such resistance to it, and it got so complicated that it was discontinued. Now, they might be trialling it, but I suspect that's something that's heading for the political long grass. So.
But we don't know.
No,
We've got no idea. There could be, in the near future, there could be a right to acquire.
or not.
So, Councillor Gillard.
Can I just say about shared ownership? The whole point of shared ownership is to enable people to get onto the housing ladder that wouldn't otherwise be able to get onto the housing ladder through the open market. It's a very efficient way of helping people to get onto the housing ladder. They can get a 5, 10, 25%, whatever percent stake in the property, pay the rent and pay the mortgage, and then build up their equity over time, which is actually quite a helpful way of getting your foot on the property ladder. And so, in essence, yes, it will be a case of people will buy these shared ownership units in order to buy outright eventually. And that's what I think we should be encouraging, property owning democracy. So I think shared ownership units are a very good thing.
Obviously, the percentage we've already put on the tender documents protects there will be a sufficient of 100% non-shared ownership. If a few go that way, hopefully there will be the rest of them protected through the housing association accordingly. I mean, which is another reason really why I think we need to go down the road with a housing association, because they're experts in this field, having many developments around the district. That's James.
But it goes back to my other point, we have no control. Once it leaves this town council, we have no control over that site and how it's going to operate in the future. Yeah, fair enough, shared ownership. Like, we're talking about 3/4 of those units are probably going to be shared ownership, and then, people that are buying them will probably sell them at market value, which is, exorbitant. So it stops it for the next person that's coming along. If there was a cap on the amount of, I don't know, you're the expert. Is there a cap on shared ownership properties when you want to sell them again?
I think it's unlikely there will be many shared ownership in this.
But we don't know. We have no control over
Well,
it, Brian.
we don't know yet until the tenders go out, and then you'll see what comes back in from the housing association, and then this council will be able to say yes or no.
Okay, so you've got starter homes, you've got affordable rent, you've got shared ownership, and you've got social rented. So, you've got social rented, so the others would be affordable rented, do you think?
I think it's likely that there will be. Most housing associations in this district, simply because of the cost of building things, tend to go for up to 80% on market rent. okay? But I think we would prefer that they didn't go over the local housing allowance, which is the maximum amount of housing benefit that you could get for a particular property based on its size. 1, 2, 3 bedrooms.
I understand this quite over all the potential variables, Mr Mayor, on what we're proposing to do. But I'm acutely aware that this has been an issue that's been sort of bubbling away since I first became a town councillor, which is a worryingly long time ago. And, we've come this far, we've come further than this, we've come to tender before, only to be tripped up at the last hurdle. And I think what I got through to me as a councillor is that there is a growing percentage of people in this town who don't consider themselves to be poor or hard done by any sense of the term, but are crying out for affordable housing to just give their children some kind of a financial toehold on staying in the community. I think there are so many people who are moving out, not necessarily for pastures new to London or wherever, or to other countries, but there are some people who are moving out because they absolutely have to. And I think that's something that that was an economic truism that I think hopefully most of us thought would pass, but we haven't. And we've been tripped up so many times, I think, to not at least see what the tenders have to say would be imprudent on us. And the other thing is that by going out to tender, we are by no means tying our hands. As a town council, we can look at everything that comes back, every proposal from everybody who cares to tender, and we can reject all of them if we wish. But we don't have to do that with any particular justification. In terms of shared ownership, I think if there were eventually a scheme that were shared ownership as opposed to affordable rented or social rented, I have my views as to all the concoctions and combinations I would prefer, certainly, but I can't second guess what people are going to tender. But if it were affordable part ownership, I believe that many associations prefer to put a clause that say you can own up to 90%, because their offer is to give, as Councillor Gillam said, people who wouldn't usually have the benefit of help from relatives or some other kind of facility with which to put down a deposit. It's to give people equity, to allow them to slowly build up equity. And I think particularly in a housing market as aggressively priced as Harpenden and its surrounding district, that's a really important thing. But that could be something that could be negotiated with a housing association, I believe, that they put that cap on. If there weren't a cap, if it were possible over a long period of time, I think if you look at those schemes that have been going within this county, that have been going for the last 15 years, very, very, very few people who've got that far, because usually it makes more economic sense for the person who is the shared owner to have sold on their stake, and actually, rather than carrying on to pay rent and their mortgage, so to have sold on and then actually bought somewhere outright themselves. But I just reflect on this, and I think it's a truism of planning and town development. Harpenden at one stage was the bowling alley and Harding Dean, in 1700 or 1800 or whatever, and then we've seen people saying, I remember when those houses went up, they were council houses, and then you see this sort of attrition of gentrification in so many areas. I can think of most of Harpenden South, for instance, at one stage, very large portions of that. Grove Avenue, where my father lives, that was all built as council housing. And I think, I understand that. Yes, it makes me really frustrated that you can't constantly preserve something for those people who are the less successful, less financially blessed. But I think to use that as an excuse to not go ahead with providing anything would be a sad loss of an opportunity for this authority.
It is. Thank you very much. That's very good.
Sorry, one final comment from me on shared ownership. Let me just explain how it works, basically. The idea is, as Councillor Gillam said, is to encourage people to get onto the housing ladder. Now, typically, what would happen is, if there were any shared ownership units on this site, let's assume that the housing association is willing to allow people to buy 50% of the value and rent 50%, right, as an example. Now, typically, the great advantage of that for a purchaser is you only need 50% of the deposit. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is, you buy half and then you rent the remaining half, in my example, at a subsidised rate. Okay? The housing association gets a grant from the government, which means that the total cost of the 50-50 proportion that I've just described means that the cost of actually getting into that house is about 2/3 of what it would be if you were buying the full amount. Okay? And it's a device to allow particularly people who expect their earnings to rise quite sharply over time, young professionals, etc., young professional couples, to get the house now when they can't actually afford it now, but expect to be able to do so in the future. And they'll buy out that remaining 50% either in one tranche or in two tranches as time passes and their income rises. So that's basically how it works.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Right. Yes, we have a couple of recommendations that we'd like to take a vote on, please. The first thing we'd like to start off with is to approve the tender document set out in Appendix A and described in paragraph 3.5. You all raise various queries and what have you, but I will be grateful if we can have a vote on that if you approve the tender document as set out at the moment. This is not the final thing, but we would like to know that you're happy with the tender document as we're sending it out. Please show. So, all except Councillor James.
Mhm.
So, and you presume you're going to vote against?
Yes.
Okay. Then we've been recommended that we should appoint 3 councillors to sit on the evaluation panel for this tender document alongside our town clerk. So please, can you show? We would have it, as far as I'm concerned, across party. We would be able to put a representative on it, so it wasn't a.
Gosh, that's the first.
No, well, you're on the planning advisory panel. Councillor James, when you turn up for the planning advisory panel, you're on that as well.
I was on it as
You
well.
didn't turn up for the last one.
Yes.
You didn't.
I
Sorry.
did. Well, when was it? I was with you. You were late.
Anyway, please, I'm not discussing that now. But no, we will. All right, but please, can I have the councillors, please, to vote? And if you're happy for us to have 3 councillors and the town clerk on that panel to discuss the completed tenders when we receive them.
Are we naming those?
Evaluation panel. So we need that to be on there. Right. So we would need to appoint them as such. So we're happy with 3. We need to appoint 3 councillors. Are you happy, Councillor Ellis? And Councillor Ellis being the expert, or would you rather not?
Probably not.
Sorry.
Can I just query whether or not double hatters will be able to stand on it? Because I think, I agree, I think it should not be double hatters.
Fine. No, that's fine. That takes out. Right, so that leaves Councillor Cooley, Councillor Canfield, Councillor James, Councillor Martin.
And I don't think I've got a conflict in relation to the tender.
Right. So, well, do we have any volunteers, first of all, who can apply, not being two-handed? Oh, it's a competition now. So, Councillor James, are you not volunteering to do
No, I'm not. No, I don't see why you can pick and choose when you want proportional representation on your working parties and when it suits you. I'm sorry, no.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, this isn't a working party.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And
One of your little covert meetings.
And Mr. Mayor, it's not a covert meeting, it's also linked into our financial regulations. It's very clear as to what we need to do on these sorts of assessment panels when we're working through the form of procurement on this.
Councillor Gunn?
I do have a quick question. Would these meetings be during the daylight? Because if they are, then that would make it difficult for me to attend.
So the meetings don't have to be during the day. However, the timetable that we've got at the moment set out under the timetable that's set out under 3.4 is very tight. So paragraphs 3.6 and 3.7 of the report do set out the kind of time frame for when we expect the meetings to be. So they don't have to be during the day. They can be arranged to suit the councillors that sit on the evaluation panel. But it is a short period between essentially the 7th and 20th of November. And the panel will be required to make recommendations to council in November.
So we ask again for volunteers interested in doing it. So we have Councillor Canfield, Councillor Williams,
Councillor Gillard.
Councillor Gillard. So, we need to vote.
Yes,
please. So we need to take a vote for the rest of the councillors, or all the councillors for that matter, if they're happy for this group of people to evaluate potential documents as and when received, as an agreed meeting date.
Oh, vote for Christmas.
Right. We'll move forward. Right. 8.5.
I will direct things
Very fast to get out.
somebody to come and rescue me from Carl's office in due course.
So as I said earlier, Councillor Barnes left the room and declared that I have to start off the discussion. I won't participate and I won't vote. So before you on page 29 of the original agenda, we have before you our planned investment in the hopper. Do you want to say something?
Mr. Mayor, there's not really much to add. So, as set out in the report, we received a proposal essentially from Harpenden Connect around supporting the Sustainable Transport Scheme, the hopper. Following that proposal, we have had some initial discussions around some key principles that I believe to be important should the council go down the route of supporting this initiative. And off the back of that, we've brought this report to you to get council's views on the recommendations that are set out, which are essentially to invest up to £60,000 to purchase 2 fit-for-purpose vehicles on the basis of the principles that we've got set out in the report.
Any comments or questions to Councillor Gillard?
Yeah, as just a general comment, I think the Harpenden Hopper, from what I've seen, has been very successful. It's been very popular with the local community, and I think it's been a very good initiative. I would be very happy to support this. I think it's a very sustainable mode of transport, obviously. It's good for the environment, and I think we should proceed with this.
Thank you. Councillor
Probably a shot to answering this question. Is this a legally set up constitutional company, private company as such, if we're going to join forces with it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, so it's a charity, I understand. So it's a proper legal entity. We wouldn't, as such, be joining forces with it. So we would purchase the vehicles, maintain ownership of them, but essentially it's some kind of lease or legal agreement that will enable us to, for Harpenden Connect to run, maintain, repair, and look after the vehicles on our behalf for a period through a lease agreement.
Ask one quick further question.
Councillor
We're having 2 vehicles, I understand. Where are they going to be garaged at night? Have we got that sorted? Or is that page 2, some more funding to, you know?
No. Sorry, can I ask Councillor Heritage to know? Sorry.
Yeah, if she wishes to.
Sorry, I'm
Okay.
going on to ask Councillor Heritage. Sorry.
Yeah, if I may. So I'm a trustee of the charity Hertfordshire Connect. It's a constituted charity at the Charities Commission. We file accounts annually. The buses are, well, when they were running, were parked up at YWAM overnight. We had a service level agreement with YWAM, i.e. paid some rent. At the moment, we're assuming that the buses would be there again. They have the space, but obviously if they weren't able to, we'd have to find somewhere else to accommodate them. But that's how we've been functioning at the moment. When we know what size buses we're getting, we can make a service level agreement again if necessary.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Martin?
Yes, thank you. I'm totally for this in principle. I think it's a shame that public transport in this area is so poor that the town council needs to fund this kind of activity and invest in public transport, as it were. Can you just clarify for me who the grant is supplied by?
Sorry, who the...
The grant. It says each year there'll be a grant for 7,000. The income.
Are you, sorry, Councillor Martin, are you referring to the proposal put forward by Hertfordshire Connect? Okay. I don't know where that grant comes from, but we can certainly either ask Councillor Heritage to fill that gap in, but certainly it's not something I'm aware of.
Also, just another one then. Do we know how much the income was for the year that they did run?
On the second question, no, we didn't make a profit. It's not a for-profit company, so we're running, and that's why we're relying on grants. The grants in the past have come from organisations such as the Harpenden Trust and Hertfordshire Community Foundation. So, like any other charity, we do the rounds, we put the applications in, and hopefully get the money back. So that's the line of that we were talking about on grants. So we've been quite successful in the past. We're also looking for working with local companies to get some money in as well. So everything that charities do, we've been doing. It's been sustainable as well.
Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Wheeler, and I'll come to Councillor James.
Whilst I think this is one of the best initiatives this council has ever put forward, and I think it's an excellent idea, and I think when people get to know of it, it is good. Can I just say, look at the question of how much marketing are we doing to push this out? And I mean, under the expenses angle here, we don't seem to have got any anything necessary in other expenses there.
Well, I can't talk too much about this because I'm not going to be speaking about it.
I think that's fair to say that part of the issue of not having reliable transport is that the organisation hasn't been able to put in place the kind of business plan and the 5-year plan and beyond that you would expect them to. So by enabling them to have the vehicles and have the reliability, it enables to have much more of a sustainable business plan. I think a key part of that business plan is marketing. You know, it's really important to any kind of initiative like this. But I think really importantly, one of the key bits of marketing to it is having the hopper operational and people seeing it going around, which I understand has been one of the troubles having a less than reliable vehicles so far. So you'll see in the recommendations here, under 2.1.4, it's for me to attend the board meetings of the Hertfordshire Connect in a kind of observer advisory capacity, and part of that is hopefully where we can make sure that the town council is still involved in the scheme, because obviously we've got an interest in the assets should we fund them, but also to help to see where we can implement that business plan and marketing and use the kind of resources that we have as town council. So you'll be aware we've got a comms and marketing officer whose part of their role, Sophia, is to not just shout about the things the town council are doing, but really to shout about everything that's going on in Harpenden. So I think that's where, by having a role on the board as well, we can offer more value to
Thank you very much.
James.
Okay, yes. I would love to support this. However, I come from a ward, East Ward, which is fairly, I suppose, socially has high levels of deprivation. So when would I expect to see the hopper in supporting my ward?
Okay. So the premise that the Hopper started in the first instance was there was no commercial buses. That's why we started in the north of the town, going around Brownwood, etc., up that way. The next premise we're looking at South Down, so around Eastbourne Park and that way, because there's no commercial buses around that way. And it wasn't based on, in quotes, deprivation, but it was more based on need, where the elderly are. In Batford, there's actually 3 or 4 buses. You're quite well serviced down there. And we have looked at that several times, because quite a few people have actually said, why don't you come around here? But there are buses that go around. So that was the premise. But eventually, if we can get it going properly and acquire another couple of buses, big plans, but we can go to various places. There's a star you can run out around those roads where buses don't go. So there is these plans going forward, but we need transport that operates. So I can't say a promise when it's going to get down there, but at the moment there are buses that run more frequently.
I know, but they are quite expensive, the bus service.
Well,
so
that's
does the Hopper,
commercial.
Yeah, I know, but would the Hopper, have a competitive?
No,
Would it be
no, it's not competitive. I mean, it's not competitive in that at the moment we only charge
£2 £2 for adults, £1 for children.
£2.
That rate.
Return or single?
Single. Yeah. And if you've got a bus pass, it will operate.
Yeah, we operate.
We're a commercial operation. We're registered with the bus.
Sorry, I thought you said you were a charity. Sorry.
We are, but we have to be registered with, in order to run a stocking service, so hail and ride type thing. You have to be registered as a proper with the bus commissioner.
Yeah, transport commissioner.
Transport commissioners, yeah. So we're a charity, but we have to operate services we're doing, time service. We have to have a proper operator's license. But we still only charge a charitable rate. There's no profit made, or if we do, we're lucky and it all goes back into it.
Thank you. Councillor Gill. Just coming back to Councillor Weaver's point on the marketing, I believe it was mentioned in the Town Council magazine recently, so we have been marketing it there, and I believe Councillor Heritage does post about it on her Facebook, and sometimes, so we have been, some people have been doing a bit of informal marketing, so to speak, so that we have been doing something with it, but I'm sure going forward that's, like Carl said, we've got a comms officer that will be able to do more work on that, so I think we will be doing more marketing, I'm sure.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, that was questions. There's a driver here this evening, thank you very much. Is it easy here volunteers? Are there sufficient volunteers coming forward to take 2 buses out?
Yes, we have a team at the moment of 19 trained volunteers and
Really?
in-house training facility as well is me.
19?
Qualified Midas training. So we can work with any volunteers. And part of the plan, if you can forgive me going off track just slightly here, part of the plan is that we should go for a lightweight bus that can be driven by anybody with a car licence. The licensing regime is unbelievably difficult. But basically the bus that we had could only be driven by people who were born, I think it's after 1997, before 1997. So that there is a problem with the capacity of the bus, which we can overcome by buying lightweight buses, which is the recommendation that you have in front of you, which I've actually had a look at. But then we can also extend the volunteering down into people under the age of 38 effectively.
Thank you. Councillor Cooley.
I'm just wondering how, I expect that they're very long life vehicles, are they? Presumably the ones that we're going to buy. I think it's a great idea. Yes, how often do you have to change the vehicles? I'm sure they probably keep going for a long time.
But they've got a warranty for 3 years on the vehicle itself and the conversion, the bus conversion. But I mean, they are commercial vehicles. They're used to doing high mileages but I was actually, a week ago I was down in Devon at the factory, one of the factories doing conversions, and they have never seen a warranty claim on any of their chassis or bodyworks. It's using a standard Peugeot or Citroën chassis. But it's the same size as most of the white van family delivery vans that you see around. A large minibus, not as large and heavy as the Mercedes one that unfortunately its demise figure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we get on to the voting on the... Any other questions? Anybody? Councillor Weaver.
Sorry, very briefly. Obviously, it's a regular service is hopeful, but it could be that the whole service could be very useful for certain park and ride services. I was thinking of Christmas carnivals and other things coming in towards that. And I just hope that it might be very useful to extend it to that sort of thing. Excuse me not saying that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's fair to say that those kind of ideas are in the thoughts of the board. I also just wanted to flag under 3.3, which is the key principles. The fourth point there is kind of the added value, I think, to the town council getting involved in this. And in that, one of the key principles is that we would have access to the bus centre's driver for a nominal number of days per year, which has to be agreed. But really what the aim of that is, perhaps to help with Councillor James's point around kind of some of our most vulnerable and deprived areas in the town, how we will use that is try to get some more vulnerable people to some of the things that are going on across the town. So, our carnivals, our big events. Recently, music in Lydica Park, the jazz event was really successful. The ambition, if we were to have a vehicle like this, in that we could go around sheltered accommodation and pick people up and bring them to the sorts of things that were going on, which I think would really help with quite particularly over in the years.
If one of these vehicles breaks down, is there some sort of replacement that could be used? You can imagine a whole load of people waiting at bus stops.
That's been a risk we've been running for the last 8 weeks. That's why we've got we've suggested 2 buses, so that we've got a basically statutory backup, which is a requirement for running the route service.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I see that it says agreement would be put in place whereby Harpenden Connect have primary use of the vehicle for, in principle, 5 years. I assume that if obviously, say for instance after the first year or so, it's deemed that there isn't enough income to repay HTC, or that maybe there's not enough volunteers or whatever it falls through, I assume that the vehicles just stay in town council's ownership, and that Harpenden Connect can't still make use of the buses without actually providing any transport for them.
Yeah, very much so, yeah. So they will remain in our ownership. They have to under our own kind of financial regulations. We can't make donations to charities or any group. I think the important thing is the lease agreement, whichever form it takes, has the suitable break clauses, I think, for all parties, I would say. But broadly, we're working on the principle of an initial 5-year business plan. After 2 years, we'll be looking at seeing whether the operation can make a contribution back to the town council. So we are not necessarily envisaging it ever paying back the full £60,000, but a contribution back to it. So essentially, we get some financial return, but also we get the social return of partly providing the community bus service, but also things like I described, where we can get people to the things that the town council are doing. In some respects we can't put value on that, but that's incredibly valuable to the people that will have access to the wider stuff that we do.
Right, are we... Paul.
Sorry, go ahead.
Right, this is going to be the last one, please. Could we
Are we going for diesel?
Yep.
Petroleum or electric? Hopefully not diesel, because there are...
Good question.
The difficulty you've got is that the particular vehicles that are adapted into buses at the present time are, generally speaking, diesel. They are Euro 6 diesel, clean diesel, but diesel nevertheless.
Okay.
But it's a 2-litre engine, and you get the same consumption out of it as you would with a Peugeot 308, and they're 40 miles per gallon.
I had to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, we were looking...
Very quickly. I was also concerned about the point Councillor Paul raised. I didn't mention it because I think the savings that you'll make instead of all of these people driving perhaps their own car will make up for that. So it is regrettable they might be diesel, but I think it's much more sustainable than having 20 odd people all driving their car at the same time. So my comment on that.
Councillor Heritage, quickly.
Can I just say, Chair, we can get electric, but it costs a lot more. So a 30,000 vehicle might cost you 90,000. So they're there, You can get them, but they've got to get a bit cheaper.
Right. I'm going to tie this up now. I think we've all become experts on buses. Thank you all for your input, questions and indeed interest. Can I thank you for our two visitors who were able to answer a lot of the questions that we haven't got to defer for obtaining answers at a later date. So we have before us 4 recommendations I'd like to take a vote on. I'll keep my hand down. So the first question we're asking please is to consider the request from Hartland Connect and decide whether we're happy to invest £60,000 to purchase 2 fit-for-purpose vehicles on the basis of the principles set out in paragraphs 3.3. So can I have a vote for that, please? Those in favour? Unanimous. Nobody against? Thank you very much. In 2.12, approve the town clerk works with Hartland Connect to agree an appropriate lease or legal agreement for the use of the vehicles. Those in favour?
Yeah.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. 2.13, approve that once the appropriate agreement is in place, the town clerk works with Hartland Connect to source and purchase the vehicles in line with our financial regulations. Those in favour? Thank you very much. Unanimous. Last 2.4, to approve that the town clerk attends formal board meetings of the Hartland Connect in order to gain insight and influence the future delivery of the scheme. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you all very much indeed. Can somebody go and rescue Councillor Farmer?
Chair, can I just say thank you very much to the town council for this great commitment, because we've been really excited about getting going. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.